Subscribe because it's free.
The throne room of the Zaldar Empire pulsed with an eerie crimson glow, the bioluminescent walls shifting in response to the Empress's rising fury. The warlords and admirals surrounding her knew better than to speak. The silence was absolute, save for the slow, deliberate tapping of her clawed fingers against the obsidian armrest of her throne. Before her, a holographic projection displayed intercepted human transmissions. They were bold, dismissive, worse. They were taunting. Humanity was mocking her. Her eyes narrowed as she listened to their final message. Try and stop us. The arrogance, the insolence, the sheer audacity of these primitive creatures. A deep, guttural growl escaped her throat. She had crushed entire civilizations for lesser offenses. The Zaldar had ruled this galaxy long, before these upstarts had even left their homeworld. And now they defied her? Her warlord shifted uneasily as the silence stretched. Finally, High Admiral Vorik stepped forward, clearing his throat. Empress, we believe this is nothing more than human posturing. They lack the fleet, the resources, or the capability to challenge us. We estimate their entire navy consists of no more than... He glanced at his data tablet, barely able to suppress his amusement. 6,000 active warships. Outdated models. A mere nuisance. The Empress remained motionless, eyes locked on a glowing projection of Earth. And yet, she said coldly, they are not kneeling. Silence. A low-ranking strategist dared to step forward. Perhaps they believe they can negotiate. The Empress moved so quickly that the air itself seemed to ripple. The strategist barely had time to gasp before her razor-edged tail lashed out, impaling him through the chest. A gurgled choke. A thud. The conversation resumed as if nothing had happened. We do not negotiate with inferiors. Her voice was calm, deadly. Grand Warlord Zelok, a veteran of 100 conquests, gave a sharp nod. Then we shall do what we have always done. Burn their worlds. Shatter their fleets. Take their resources. The council murmured in agreement. The idea of a war against humanity was almost laughable. The Zaldar Empire had 50,000 warships, fleets that had subjugated civilizations spanning the stars. Entire species had been eradicated for daring to resist. What could humanity possibly do? The Empress exhaled slowly, the tension in her body easing as the inevitable decision settled upon the room. Deploy the Armada. We move on their outer colonies first. Let them understand what real power is. Her claws flex against the armrest, carving deep grooves into the obsidian. And when we reach their home world, she allowed the words to linger, savoring the inevitability of it. We will remind them who rules this galaxy. The warlords bowed, turning swiftly to carry out her command. In less than an hour, the largest fleet in recorded history began its march toward human space. It was not a war. It was an execution. The Zaldar Armada surged into human space like a storm of fire and death. Tens of thousands of warships, from sleek destroyers to planet-killer dreadnoughts, tore through the void with ruthless efficiency. Human colonies on the fringes of their territory never stood a chance. One by one, outposts were annihilated, orbital defenses were shattered, and planetary surfaces were scorched beyond recognition. Admiral Vorik watched the devastation unfold from the bridge of his flagship, arms folded behind his back. The conquest was proceeding exactly as expected. Humanity's defenses were pathetic, their stations abandoned almost too easily. Entire fleets were nowhere to be found. A junior officer stepped forward, helmet tucked under one arm. Admiral, we have encountered no significant resistance. Only light skirmishes, random frigates and outdated cruisers engaging before retreating. Vorik sneered. Cowards. They are fleeing to their core worlds, just as expected. The Empress's face flickered onto the command screen, her golden eyes glowing with barely contained fury. Is it done? We are advancing without delay, Vorik said with a deep bow. Human forces are non-existent in any meaningful capacity. Our fleet will reach their inner systems within days. Her expression remained unreadable, and yet they still resist. Vorik hesitated. It was true. Humans were fighting, but not like any species he had encountered before. Their fleets engaged with surgical precision, appearing out of nowhere, striking hard, and vanishing before any counterattack could land. Hit-and-run tactics, unpredictable movements. More than once, a Zaldar dreadnought had been completely destroyed before even detecting the enemy's approach. The Empress leaned forward slightly. "They are buying time." Vorik stiffened. "For what, Empress?" "Their end is certain." "Then explain this." A new image appeared on screen. A destroyed Zaldar battleship, but something was wrong. Its exterior was intact, no visible hull breaches. Yet its internal systems were melted from the inside. An eerie silence fell over the bridge. This was not human technology. "We do not know how they did this," the Empress said, voice sharp with irritation. "But we do know one thing. They want us to reach their homeworld." The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. Why would any species invite an invading force toward their last stronghold? A trap? Impossible. The Empress's voice turned cold. "Push forward. Burn their colonies to the last ember. I want Earth within my grasp before the cycle turns." Vorik straightened. "It will be done, Empress." The transmission ended. He turned to his officers. "Ignore their tricks. We have the numbers. We have the firepower. Continue the advance." But the thought gnawed at him, deep in his mind. What was humanity hiding? The Zaldar Armada reached the Sol system, expecting victory. Instead, they found hell waiting for them. The moment their fleet exited warp, space itself seemed to twist and ripple. Anomaly alarms screamed across every warship, their instruments failing to make sense of the readings. Then, the void opened up, and the truth was revealed. 2,000 supercarriers, each the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons, exuding a terrifying presence, materialized from deep space concealment. Silence. Not a single Zaldar warlord spoke, as the sheer scale of humanity's deception became horrifyingly clear. Each supercarrier unleashed thousands of warships, a flood of destruction pouring into battlefield. Fighters, bombers, dreadnoughts, millions of ships descending like a tidal wave. Admiral Vorik's breath caught in his throat. This was impossible. This cannot be real, an officer whispered in horror. They never had this kind of fleet. We scouted them. They hid it, Vorik said, voice barely above a whisper. They let us think they were weak. They let us march here. Then the first volley was fired. The sky erupted. Kinetic railguns the size of cities fired at near light speed, tearing through Zaldar dreadnoughts like paper. Hypersonic torpedoes ignored shielding, detonating deep within the alien vessels. Swarms of autonomous AI-controlled drones ripped through their ranks, overwhelming capital ships in coordinated assaults. The once invincible Zaldar fleet collapsed in moments. Panic spread like wildfire. Commands shouted over comms, distress signals sent in desperation. None of it mattered. The supercarriers had already won before the battle even began. On the bridge of her flagship, the Empress stood frozen, her claws dug into the armrests of her throne, the first sliver of something unfamiliar creeping into her chest. Fear, her empire, her legacy, was crumbling before her eyes. A desperate officer turned to her, voice shaking. "Empress, we must retreat." The words had barely left his mouth before she struck. A single movement, a snapped neck, a lifeless body hitting the floor. "There is no retreat," she hissed. "We fight. We win." But deep down, she already knew. Humanity had outplayed them. The battle was over before it had truly begun. Zaldar warships burned, their wreckage drifting like shattered bones across the void. The once mighty Armada, 50,000 strong, had been annihilated in less than a day. Human supercarriers advanced relentlessly, a wall of unstoppable force, bombarding what little resistance remained. Zaldar dreadnoughts, the pride of the Empire, were hunted down like prey. Some tried to flee, none succeeded. On the Empress's flagship, the bridge was in chaos. Warlords shouted over each other, some demanding surrender, others screaming for retribution. None had a solution. She stood motionless, staring at the ruins of her fleet, the realization crushing her like a collapsing star. Humanity had been preparing for this war for decades. Every abandoned station, every retreat, every failed engagement, all part of their deception. They had played weak, lured the Zaldar deeper and deeper, until they were exactly where humanity wanted them to be. Now there was no escape. The main screen flickered, and a human transmission cut through the chaos. A calm, emotionless voice filled the bridge. "It's over." A shiver ran through the remaining warlords. No threats, no grand speeches, just cold finality. The Empress's claws dug into her palms. This is impossible," she whispered. The human voice answered, as if reading her mind. "You underestimated us. That was your first mistake." The final strike came without mercy. Supercarrier warships descended like judgment, obliterating the last strongholds of the Zaldar. Their empire, which had stood for thousands of years, collapsed in a single battle. The Empress's flagship was the last to fall. As her ship shook apart, flames consuming the bridge, she finally understood. Humanity was not weak. They were not prey. They had been the apex predators all along, and the galaxy would never forget.